This is Polyamory Weekly, tales from the front of responsible non-monogamy from a pansexual, kink-friendly point of view. A warning for our under 18 listeners. This is an adult-oriented podcast about really lascivious things, like communication and honesty in relationships. If you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, please visit scarletteen.com.
This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 571 for April 14th, 2019. Coming up on today's show, Growing Up Poly with Koe Creation. It's coming up on today's show. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Minx. So happy to be back behind the microphone and chatting with our old friend Koe Creation this week. Yay! But of course, before we get to the interview, we have our housekeeping to take care of. First off, we are not so freshly back from the It's Complicated OK conference in Tulsa. I tell you, I'm still getting used to this publishing every 2 weeks. On the one hand, so much less stressful. On the other hand, it just feels like it's forever between episodes. It's okay. I'll get used to it. So we did go a couple weeks ago to the It's Complicated OK conference in Tulsa. First year con, very small, very homey, very chic. And it was a really good time. I always have this sort of push-pull relationship with being back in the South. So it was, a little strange, kind of old home week, but kind of not. We got to meet some great new folks, though. We always love teaching our Kicking Poly Drama in the AS class. So much fun. And our Poly Dating 101 class. We love telling you how to improve your poly dating profile and tell you everything you're doing wrong. Well, and we show how to improve, right? We show these, we show how to optimize your dating profile online. And a little coincidence for me, one of my dear friends from college happens to live in Tulsa and is familiar with the poly community, and which is weird because I don't think I knew that about him. It was kind of interesting. And we got to get together, spend a little time catching up. Not very much because we were super busy. It's a one-day conference, so you kind of cram it all into one day. But we got a little catch-up time too. So hats off. Thanks to It's Complicated for bringing us out there and letting us find out what the Oklahoma poly scene was like. The ever-tireless Alan of the Polyamory in the News blog has posted a couple of articles. This one caught my eye, entitled, On the Opposite End of Earth, Is Polyamory on the Rise? It's apparently there was a spate of articles in New Zealand's press. He says there's bupkis for 2 years, and then all of a sudden, 3 pieces about polyamory in March and April this year. There was a long feature article in Radio New Zealand's news site called Is Polyamory on the Rise? Spoilers, yes. And then also Bang, a TV show, I guess, season 3, episode 4, it was podcast called Pretty Poly. It's an article and a 50-minute podcast that came out on March 25th. And then also on Bang, The Prehistoric Origins of Modern Sexuality, article and 30-minute podcast from March 20th, featuring Sex at Dawn and talking about Christopher Ryan's work, whom we're familiar with. And he also throws some other references into the post. He's really great at these roundup posts, which is like, here's all the other stuff, in case you forgot, that has happened with polyamory in New Zealand. So there are articles from 2015, 16, 17. Check it out. Link in the show notes at polyweekly.com. And our interview this week is going to be with our co-host, Koe Creation, who has not been on the podcast because they have been really busy writing a book called This Heart Holds Many about growing up in a polyamorous family. Koe grew up in a sex-positive polyamorous family, which gave them literally a lifetime of experience in building non-monogamous families. Koe supports those investigating their inner truth by filling roles like personal gender cheerleader and polyamorous auntie you never had. Residing in San Francisco, Koe is available for speaking and consultation. I am so excited to welcome back to the Poly Weekly Studios, Koe Creation. Welcome back. It's been so long.
Thank you so much, Minx. It's good to be here.
Well, I guess you have a good excuse for being off the show for so long because you just went out and wrote yourself a book.
I did indeed. I am making my grand re-entrance to the wide world of podcasting and sex positivity with my book, This Heart Holds Many.
I love it. The book is called, we'll talk about that in a bit, This Heart Holds Many, My Life as the Non-Binary Millennial Child of a Polyamorous Family. Ooh, how many networks in the Venn diagram can we put together there?
Truth. Apparently it's really important with a subtitle to get in as many of the qualifying words as possible. So it needed to be as catchy as it could.
All the keywords are right in there. Yes. So for those who may be tuning in for the first time, or, since it's been a while, maybe they're like, Koe, who is that Koe person? Share a little bit of your background and bio with our audience.
Hi, my name is Koe Creation. I am a second generation sex positive polyamorous youth and sex educator. I am West Coast based and very much of a West Coast counterculture mentality. I've been working in professional sex positivity and for LGBTQ rights for 15 years now, which is exciting. And yeah, I am coming out with my first published works, which is exciting and still new to say. I live in San Francisco and participate a lot in community here as well.
And as we said in the subtitle, you are non-binary and prefer the pronoun they. And
yes.
There, correct?
Yes, they, them, and theirs.
Perfect. Well, we'll talk about the book in more detail a little later, but one of the reasons I just always love having you on the show, apart from the fact that you're just a fabulous human being, is that you did grow up in a poly family. And I think a lot of people have misconceptions about what that's like. I'm wondering, what is the biggest misconception that people ask you about? That they just have wrong about what it's about growing up in a poly family?
So to answer that, I'm going to give you a teensy sneak peek into the book. Are you ready?
I am so ready.
So
bring it.
The chapter titles are actually common misconceived questions that I get asked in my life. So I'm going to read you a couple of those. One of them is, do you feel screwed up because of your childhood? Another one is, when do the kids just get to be kids?
My goodness.
The last one is, are you just this way because of your parents? I tackle a lot of those questions in the book, and those three in particular I chose because those are some of the major themes that have come up around the feelings of fear that others have or even people have within themselves who want to have polyfamilies or have polyfamilies about, am I doing something wrong? Am I hurting the children? Are you hurting the children because of this lifestyle of yours? Am I hurting my child because I'm providing them instability of some kind? Sort of the flip side of that I experienced a lot was people sort of assuming that there was something wrong with my family, or assuming that they should be worried about my family in some way, or it must be really complicated, or it must be over-sexualized, or it must be too highbrow for a child to handle. Those sorts of concepts, I think, were the biggest misconceptions. The reality was it's a family, so it's inherently complicated. And my parents were really good at being age appropriate with their boundaries and taught us to be individual little humans. It's always fun, whenever I get asked a question about my family, it's just interesting to see how people's judgments and misconceptions automatically come up, and I can sort of address them directly.
I'm wondering what some of the benefits are that you feel you got from growing up in this particular lifestyle that you think maybe other kids didn't get quite as well as you did.
Absolutely. The capacity to navigate Google Calendar at a young age, I think, is unsurpassed. But I actually asked my siblings this during the writing of the book. There were a lot of little moments where I would send them late night texts or Facebook messages being like, what do you think about this? And they're like, you are ridiculous, Ko. I asked them, what are some of the benefits that you found from our raising that you find come up in your life the most? And all three of us really have a value for sex positivity. Honest and empathetic communication. We understand that our emotions can be really big and overwhelming, but we understand what they are and how to work with them in our communication, and also not leave our emotions at the door when we are communicating with people. I think all of us, we're very empathetic people in a very grounded, realistic way. And then sex positivity has given me so much internal power that I use to inspire others. Not that I don't feel sexual shame or negativity or insecurity, but again, I have a lot more awareness about it. And so I can look at it and say, oh, well, this feeling that I have around insufficiency and sexuality has a lot of parts to it. Some of it come from systems. Some of it come from my emotions. And I can kind of piece it apart and know that it's not inherently wrong. And that understanding that something sexual is not inherently wrong helps me in my ability to deconstruct the rest of the negativity. That, I think, is key and has helped me with my self-esteem, my gender presentation, my forthright and balance in my relationships, my confidence, like all sorts of places in my life.
It occurs to me that we haven't actually defined sex positivity, so let's take a moment to do that, because some people think that sex positivity means you're talking about sex all the time and you're sexualizing things, thus the fear of you're over-sexualizing your kids, like the media isn't already doing that.
Right. Sex positivity is the inherent thought that sex is a natural part of the world. We use the phrase positivity because it's a reaction to the negativity that we see, but I would say that sex normalization is the action involved. So instead of saying sex is bad, don't talk about it, say sex is complicated and it needs to be respected, and we can talk about it in certain ways and times. It's a much more normalized and, positive way to look at sexuality and how it works in our daily lives as individuals, as groups, and as a society.
Just for those of you who like Wikipedia definitions.
They're probably way more concise
says,
than I am.
Actually, I really like your definition a lot. Wikipedia does say sex positivity is an attitude towards human sexuality that regards all consensual sexual activities as fundamentally healthy and pleasurable, encouraging sexual pleasure and experimentation.
Love it.
I like yours better, though, because I do think that sexuality is complex and sexual expression is complex. Mm-hmm. And I like that you mentioned that, and there is a need to unpack the different aspects of it.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift over to the book, the bouncing baby book that you birthed.
It really did feel like a birth. Actually, I've been telling people that for me, it's not just about the gestation and birth, but it's like a full child rearing, because I've also gone through the making sure that it knows how to put itself together and look presentable for the world. And we made sure that, it knows how to talk to everybody. And now I feel like I'm sending it off to college and I don't have any control over it anymore. And it's going to go make mistakes in the world. Like it legit feels like a full parenting experience,
It's funny. I was just debating unsuccessfully reader response theory with a friend on Facebook recently. Mm-hmm. Reader response theory being the school of literary criticism that basically says, and artistic creation that says, once the artist creates something and puts it out in the world, the artist basically no longer has say over the message, that the way that people interpret that work in their own lives, those interpretations are just as valid as whatever the author or creator intended. So I think it is kind of like you're sending your baby off to college a little bit, because people are going to take it and interpret it and embrace certain parts and not others and maybe misinterpret what you intended, but hopefully it will all be for the good.
Oh, I have no doubt. It's just been, that was a really kind of fun realization going through this experience and having it look differently than I thought it would, or having just like those experiences where everybody can tell you about it and then you have it in your own body and voila, you understand,
It's different. Yeah.
Right, it's just different. And so people are like, oh, it's like birth. And I'm like, actually, no, not for me. For me, it's something different, which was a rather fun discovery to make in the process of this. You mentioned other people owning their interpretation of the works. One of the things I found, Minx, I'm like walking into this whole world of being an author. And it's fascinating. Books are a fascinating product. This feeling of my dad is like, well, my child, the author. And I was like, Dad, the book releases in a month. Like, calm down, Dad. It's interesting to sort of like take on this new identity in myself because I wrote the thing I know. I have literally spent hours on this podcast talking to you about these topics. I can talk about it forever. And so for me, it was just sort of like writing down what I knew the best. And then looking at it as an actual book was a whole different experience of like, well, what is the narrative? What do other people need from this book? And what is the focus? So really distilling down my message within the story of my childhood was so fascinating. And so now I'm sending it out. Like a memoir, I think, is kind of like nothing else, because the thing that other people are inherently going to put their perspective on is your truth. It's not fiction. It's not the recounting of somebody else's story or dates and events. It's yours. And that, I think, has been the really edgy, fun, risky part for me, is the specific memoirship. And also people have asked me, what are the things that I discovered learning or learned about myself in writing this book? What was it like being an author or writing a book? And that is such a weird question to me, because I wrote my memoir. Like, I wrote an autobiographical piece. So for me, it was a lot of like tearing through my childhood and writing my siblings at midnight, asking them super random questions. So for me, it was an incredibly internal experience where I imagine I was talking to an author friend named Jay Wiseman of SM 101. So we were talking about being authors, but he comes from an incredibly technical background. And so for him, writing a book was about research and going into an intellectual space. It's been really interesting to have it go from being about my big fat poly life to like crafting it into a tangible story for somebody else to behold.
What did you learn from writing the book?
The major things I learned from writing the book are that everybody goes through the process of figuring out what they want to intake from their childhood and move forward with them from a place of, hopefully, of power. And I think we all do that in different ways. And I think it can be very subtle. The book for me was that process. It was writing out the things that I found value in, the things that were hard, integrating them, figuring out the systems that my family was actively using, and then what I wanted to keep for myself and who I am, who I was, who I am. I think also throughout the process of the book, it's helped me figure out how to navigate some of the bigger, larger systems. I grew up very, very counterculture. And not to say that, I did live on a commune for a minute, but we lived with technology and integrated in society, but there was a little bit of this idea that I was always going to have to fight the system. I'm being published through Thorntree Press, an absolutely wonderful, incredibly poly publishing company, but it's still a publishing deal, it's still on a deadline. I have an ISBN. There's a whole process that it's going through, and I'm participating in it, and I'm understanding what it takes. And that feels super adult and really cool and still pretty punk rock. So one of my moms will still be happy with me.
What do you want people to take away from your book?
My number one goal with the book has always been I want it to get into the hands of the prospective poly parents. So the people who are like, know that they are non-monogamous of some flavor and know they want a family of some flavor and don't know what to do with that. And for the people who have these families and are searching, it's that never-ending hunger for something that looks like you. I want this book to get to those people. And finally, I want it to get into the hands of guidance counselors and on the bookshelves in, drop-in centers. I would love it to get into places of community. And get into seems like a really invasive term, but I would love it to land there. I would love it to show up in those people's lives. That's always been my dream. And also, I've said this before, I am super curious what other people's stories are. I hope that, as far as I'm aware, as far as everyone I've talked to is aware, this is the first book of its kind. This is not only the first book from a second-generation polyamorous perspective, but it's one of the first books ever on polyamory as a familial concept. I'm really proud that I worked, my butt off to do that. And I know that there are hundreds of other stories out there that are completely different than mine, and I want to hear those. So, gauntlet thrown.
And this is a really mean question to ask you, but I'm going to do it anyway. I guess I am a little bit of a sadist. What's next?
My Patreon should be launching in a month or two. And from there, it'll give me access to do more consistent content. I've always been somebody who likes to do a little bit of everything, right? So I have a little bit of video blog. I grace your podcast. But this is an opportunity for me to do all the little things I like to do under one heading. So that'll be my focus for the next couple of months. And then from there, there'll be more content and hopefully a course in the next year is my goal. So something that people can download and use in their daily lives.
Like a live class or something people can take in the privacy of their homes, or something that like guidance counselors and others can teach?
Mm-hmm. There will be some webinars involved, and then those webinars will be downloadable so people can do it at home. And it'll tie in directly to some content that's in the book already. So it'll help broaden an experience that people are having. I'm not talking about it quite yet because I'm not quite allowed, but as soon as I am, I'll come on your podcast again and tell you all about it.
Already looking forward to having you back.
Thank you so much, Minx. It's wonderful to talk to you again.
It's great to have you back.
Yeah.
I know you've been off changing the world, and I'm super happy for you and super proud of you and your new book, but I missed you, and it's awesome to have you back.
Well, indeed. Let's definitely calendar it up and find another time.
Cool. In the meantime, where can people find you and your book?
Absolutely. Okay, so KoeCreation.com has gotten a facelift that I'm very excited about. You should go check that out. That's KoeCreation.com. This Heart Holds Many has a page, so that's KoeCreation.com/book or the book, and it's on Amazon. This and Goodreads under This Heart Holds Many. I am at CoCreate on social media. And if you're around San Francisco, wave at me.
Awesome. And we'll put all those links in the show notes available at polyweekly.com. Or if you're listening through any type of app, you'll find all of those in the show notes section. Koe, thank you so much again for joining us. It is, as always, a delight to have you on.
It's an honor. Thank you, Minx.
And thanks again to Koe for joining us. You can find out all the ways you can contact Koe, as well as the link to their new book, on our show notes at polyweekly.com or in the show notes section of whatever podcatching app you are using. It's time for your Happy Poly Moment of the Week, brought to you by Fubbly Polyamorists everywhere. Our first Happy Poly Moment is from Kim, who says, "Hi, you two." I will say hi from lustyguy. Longtime listener, first-time emailer. I wanted to share 2 Happy Poly moments from our polycule. 1. About a week ago, my wife's boyfriend R asked her to take him engagement ring shopping for his other partner, K. They looked at rings, deliberated, and picked out a unique and appropriate swings both ways hinge folding ring, it's hard to describe in an email, that he thought would be appropriate for her, and a great joke, too. 2. When I told our kids that R and K were getting married, they were super happy and wanted to know when the wedding would be. My youngest wanted to be the flower girl and was a little crestfallen when I told her that R's daughter would most likely be the flower girl. Keep on keeping on, and don't worry about the release schedule. Our One Family podcast is currently on hiatus. Has it been 6 months? Awaiting inspiration for a glorious return in season 2. Well, thanks so much for writing in, Kim. And it's nice to know that other people take 6-month hiatuses. Hiati? As well. Our next happy poly moment is from Olivia. I'm a 20-something pan-ace female, and a couple of months ago, I ended a 4-year relationship with a monosexual guy, mostly because I'm ace and didn't want to live monogamously anymore. Being ace, by the way, that stands for asexual, I didn't think I could find people interested in dating me and being okay with poly, but I have. I now have 2 great partners, both ace. But the happy poly moment is this. For Thanksgiving, I decided to invite both my partners and plus ones to a supper along with some friends. I was a bit nervous as one is really shy and completely new to poly, and both had never met each other before. They both got there in advance and helped me get the party going. I followed your advice and had already informed them of their common interests so they could have something to talk about. I also had planned a hand turkey drawing session and some games. When the rest of the guests arrived, the 3 of us organically put ourselves on the same team and actually won. Many high fives were shared and team spirit was good. Partner A spent the night on the couch for the first time, and we watched a movie under the blankets the next morning. And then I joined partner B for some cuddling in the evening. Best weekend ever. Also, I now have their hand-sized turkeys on my wall to remember this moment by. For those of you who are not American, this is an American tradition. You know, we celebrate Thanksgiving in November to celebrate, well, for a day not massacring native indigenous people, and we eat turkey. But one of the traditions is to take your hand and draw around it and make that into the feathers of a turkey that we're eating, which is a little weird. But that's a thing that we Americans do. She continues, speaking of Thanksgiving, I am thankful of you for making this show, making people feel less alone, and show it's possible to find people who not only tolerate your particularities, but appreciate and share them. So a big thank you. Well, thank you. And I'd like to welcome 2 new Poly Weekly Playmates, Chris and Alisha, who joined at the rockstar highest level to help support the podcast. Chris and Alisha, thank you so much for contributing to the podcast and for keeping us going. And thanks to all of our Poly Weekly Playmates for your generous donations this month. We are a free resource. We've helped hundreds of thousands of people navigate their introduction to and continued success with polyamory. Those donations keep the podcast free for everyone inside and outside the community. Questions, comments, feedback, email polyweekly@gmail.com or call 802-505-POLY and leave your question. If you want to schedule us to speak at your event, like It's Complicated Okay or any other event where you'd like to have us come out, contact lustyguy at polyweekly.com and he'll actually answer your email in a fairly timely manner. Thanks for listening, and remember, it's not all about the sex.